pair of archbishops, are on their way, but they are slightly delayed in traffic. So just please relax and carry on chatting to your neighbours for another 5 minutes or so, and then we will be hopefully then starting proceedings by sharing with you our launch video. But thank you so much for coming. Do please bear with us and just relax for another 5 minutes. Thank you. I don't know whether to leave my speech here or if that's going to get... I'll keep it under there. Reimagining Care Commission was asked to develop a radical and inspiring vision for care and support. Not to tinker around the edges, not to focus on narrow questions, but to develop a vision of what care and support should be like, drawing on Christian values.
In the Bible, we read that we're all made in the image of God. We have value, dignity, and worth. And because of that, we're called to love our neighbour as we love ourselves. And we're all created with a purpose. Jesus Christ says, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." This is a vision of abundant life where everyone can flourish, regardless of age or ability.
Yet too many people are denied this. If we are old or have a disability, we don't always get the care and support we need to do the things we enjoy, to live, to love, to work and to play. If we're going to change things, we need to start by rethinking attitudes to care and support. This is about all of us. At different times in our lives, we'll either be caring for others or being cared for.
Because care and support affects all of us, we all have a role to play in making it better. So the Commission's calling for a national care covenant, which sets out the mutual responsibilities of everyone, individuals, families, and communities, as well as local and national government. We hope that a national care covenant would lead to investment in communities, a stronger role for the state, a new deal for unpaid carers, and would give people a greater say over their care. And underpinning all of this is our commitment to one another as citizens.
Finally, we need a radical redesign of how care and support is organised. Everyone told us that the system is too complex. It could and should be much clearer, more straightforward. People should be trusted to know best what they need to live a good life and able to get access to care without a fight. Whether we are old or young with a disability, whether living at home or in a specialist setting, we should be able to participate in our communities. Different housing options are needed, and we must harness technology to enable us to stay connected. And those who provide care deserve better recognition and reward for the work they're doing. But we must also redesign roles to focus on relationships and values needed to do the job well.
And that's what this report is all about, putting values at the heart of care and support and reimagining care. By rethinking attitudes, by rebalancing our roles and responsibilities, and by redesigning the system, we believe that everyone can live a full life.
Fantastic. So I hope that that has given you a taste of the report, and I know that all of you have got a report on your seats. I'm Anna Dixon. I've been chair of the Archbishop's Commission on Reimagining Care for the last 18 months, and it's great to welcome you all here. We were obviously I was hoping by now that I was going to be seeing the Archbishops walking through the door in order that they would be up here to make that welcome. I'm going to just suggest, I can't see where the team is, but whether we might also now go straight into the, whether it might be possible to go straight into the other video that we have prepared for today, except right on cue. Here is Archbishop Justin and Archbishop Stephen. Welcome. Please do come down to the front. So I think actually we'll stick with the planned running order, and I will let them get their jackets off and then invite Archbishop Justin to come up to the stage in a moment to start our formal proceedings. So thank you so much, everyone, for bearing with us, and I would like to invite Archbishop Justin in a moment to come and make his opening remarks. So thank you.
We did set off on time. It's just the traffic's a bit, this and that-ish. Thank you. Well, thank you to Anna and Bishop James and all the Commission members who are mostly sitting down here for your extraordinarily hard work on this report over the last 2 years. It's greatly appreciated. I'm very pleased to be here with you all, albeit a bit late, and in particular with special guests who've contributed very generously to the Commission's work. Members of Livability's Changes for the Future Forum, Seeability, and a number of family carers. I'm also particularly pleased that I'm accompanied by our daughter Ellie, who is herself in receipt of care, and I have permission from her to say that. Normally, if I mention any of our children, there's a long-standing tradition in the family, which is good for all clerical families, that it costs me £5 for every mention. But she's very kindly let me off that today, as the others will be very disappointed. I haven't mentioned any others, just for the record. The timing of this Commission's work could not have been better. The Archbishop of York and I had the privilege of launching this commission in April 2021, incidentally 2 Prime Ministers and 4 Health Secretaries ago, when the government was making plans to reform social care. The government's particular focus was on how to fund the social care system. Drawing on Christian theology, tradition, and values, the Commission has addressed a much more fundamental set of issues. Before we think about how to fund social care, we need to step back and consider the nature and purpose of care and support. In other words, what do we want to fund? What are the values which underpin care? How do we support one another to live well and participate in our communities, regardless of our age or ability? This is one of a package of pragmatic and self-critical reports, self-critical of the Church of England, which also challenges others as well as the Church of England. They seek to reverse the usual political question, what do we spend our money on, with 2 questions of ultimate value. What are our values for the society and the country we seek in the world in which we live? And how do we finance it over the long term? In recent government reports, there is a heavy emphasis on rights, choice, independence, control. They may matter, but they cannot be sustained unless, as this report does, we combine with those rights an emphasis on values we do not often talk about much in public policy. Loving kindness, mutuality, interdependence, combined with a hard-nosed realism about the difficulties faced by people who draw on care and support, care workers and unpaid carers. There is no magical bullet to fix our broken social care system, but there is an opportunity for change, to rebuild something broken into something much better, to reimagine care. The Commission has called as one of its central recommendations, probably the most important, for the development of a national care covenant, which would provide clarity about what we can expect and what is expected of us as individuals, as families, as communities, and local and national government. The theme of covenant appears a number of times in the Bible as God enters relationships with human beings And God and his people make promises to one another. This is enormously relevant to our own times and our understanding of care. At its heart, a national care covenant is about a solemn agreement that all relevant parties will work together to ensure that people have the right care and the right support to flourish as much as they are able in life. There is already a covenant in our national life, the military covenant. And that has been established for many years about how we support those who are serving or who have served in the armed services. The idea of a covenant encourages us to move away from the language of contract and rights towards the language of partnership and interdependence. This is a radical change in thinking. It's a radical challenge to the philosophical basis of our society. Social care should not simply be reduced to a system of users and providers, because it involves us all. People who draw on care and support, people who make social care their profession, family members and neighbours who are caring for their loved ones, and a society in which we are all diminished when any are held back. How we care for those who are outwardly I stress, powerless, is a test of a society that acts well. In Mark's Gospel, Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Normally, when that's read, everyone goes, "Ah, how cute." But what he was actually doing was challenging a basic sense of society. In those days, because of the very high levels of infant mortality, children didn't count very much. They often, in some countries, didn't get named until they'd got past the most dangerous stage. It was too painful. And Jesus is saying something radically challenging. There are people in our society today who are quite wrongly perceived as lacking value. People who are older, people who are disabled. The Bible calls us to repent of our attitudes and to see such people as those from whom we receive blessing. And as Ellie here would remind me if I didn't say it, not all disability is visible. She has been challenged by a train conductor or a bus conductor, I can't remember which, bus, who said, "Well, you don't look disabled," when he saw her card. This report reminds us that we all have values as God's children, people who are created in the image of God, intimately known and deeply loved, whatever our circumstances, age, or ability. It reminds us that care and support is about all of us, for we will all be cared for and supported at different times in our lives, everything from infancy to old age. And we will all offer care and support to the people around us. Interdependence, not independence, must lie at the heart of our approach to care. We all need each other. There is a special role here for communities. This report encourages us to move away from a false choice, a false binary of whether the state should do more or whether families should do more to provide care. The answer lies not in asking communities to do more with limited resources, but truly investing in our communities, recognizing the value of places in which everyone, regardless of age or ability, can develop relationships, participate, and be supported to stay well and healthy. The message of this report is something for which institutions from government downwards must bear responsibility. Central government with significant funding implications, local government with significant implementation obligations, through to NGOs, the voluntary sector, churches, who have significant participatory implications. That is the call on institutions. There is nothing party political about this report. The social care system has been brewing the current crisis for far longer than any single party has been in office. The call on individuals is equally important. Groups of people in their community who come together to create inclusive, welcoming spaces, unpaid carers who every day point us to the love of Jesus Christ, carrying out their duties, which are often thankless, often under enormous, almost unendurable pressure, and who must be valued far more in return. The call on all of us to love our neighbour and to remind each other of the innate dignity and worth of every single human being. The task of reimagining care is for all of us. That means we must work together, cross-party, faith groups, local communities, taking our lead from the priorities of people who are most affected as part of a wider effort to change attitude, to articulate a hopeful vision of what care and support should and could be like. There is nothing in here that is unattainable or impossible. If we embrace the idea of covenant, if we put partnership and values at the heart of our efforts, then we truly can reimagine care and support for these times. And it's now my pleasure to hand over to the Chair and Co-Chair of the Commission, Anna and Bishop James, to share the findings of their report. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Archbishop Justin, for your remarks and also your commitment and leadership on this issue. And to both you and to Archbishop Stephen for putting your trust in me as the chair to lead this commission. So thank you for the opportunity. I'd like really to thank not only for you coming today, but there are so many people in this room who have contributed throughout the Commission's work. And I'd particularly like to thank my co-chair, Bishop James. It's been such a pleasure working together with James and also with the other commissioners, many of whom are here today, Jabir Butt, Clinton Farquharson, Richard Humphreys, Debbie Anstead, Anna Severite, and Professor John Swinton, as well as Helena Hairclots, who sadly couldn't be with us today. These commissioners were selected based on their expertise in the range of fields, but each of us have also been living with the reality of care and support. Whether caring for a parent with dementia at home, settling a relative into a care home, trying in vain to recruit a personal assistant, managing episodes of COVID and deterioration in our own health, as well as dealing with our own losses and bereavement. Between us, we've all had first-hand experience of care and support, and we've shared these personal experiences, and it has strengthened our resolve to change things. For myself, within a few weeks of taking on this role, my mum, aged 80, was hospitalised with COVID, and she's since had 2 major surgeries. My dad became her carer, with support from me and my siblings. I won't forget the intimacy of helping her with washing and dressing when she was too weak to manage that for herself. Something that carers, both paid and unpaid carers, do with such skill and kindness every day all around the country. And yet too often this care goes unnoticed and it goes undervalued. But for my mum, it was also the game of Scrabble and the video calls with grandchildren. It was the meals and calls and visits from her church family that really made a difference to her recovery. And so that's also why we are thinking about care and support as so much more than those personal care tasks. It is about the social, emotional, and spiritual support that we need to flourish. We know it's hard out there. We engaged with people and we heard just how tough it is for people who draw on care, whose needs are not being met, for unpaid carers who are picking up the responsibilities, with many more of them doing many more hours, and care workers stretched because of vacancies. We know that change is urgently needed, and yet the debate seems to have got stuck on crisis and short-term fixes, stuck on questions of money and who's going to pay for it, and stuck latterly on the problems of the NHS. We took a very different starting point. We were challenged to reimagine care, and we started with values of love, of trust, of mutuality. We started with the hopes and dreams of those who draw on care and support, and it's great to have many of them here, and we'll be hearing from them in a moment, and also their carers. We started with where we want to get to, not where we are now.
Throughout our time as a commission, we've been influenced in particular by two theological convictions. The first of which was mentioned by Archbishop Justin, the notion that every human being is created in the image of God. We, all of us, whoever we are, have value and dignity and worth because of who we are, not because of what we are able to contribute. And the second theological conviction is a theme which crops up again and again throughout the Bible. It's there in the Old Testament and the New. It's summed up by the command of Jesus Christ to love our neighbour as we love ourselves. And as we've been reflecting over these months, we have come to the conclusion that care and support must always be about human flourishing. It's about everybody having a full life, regardless of age or ability. And in response to what we heard during our listening and engagement exercise, we came up with three big ideas, as it were, to reimagine care and support. The first is that we need to rethink attitudes, particularly our attitudes to what care and support is all about and who's giving, receiving, and so on. We need to rebalance roles and responsibilities, and we need to redesign the whole system.
So firstly, coming to rethinking attitudes, throughout our work we heard a consistent message that as a society we don't care enough about care. So it's why we've made it our number one priority. Care and support isn't about other people, it is about all of us. At different times in our lives, we will either be caring for someone or being cared for. It's an issue that affects everyone, and our attitudes, language, and actions need to reflect that. We also believe that our attitude to care and support is affected by our attitudes to age and disability. So we're calling for us to tackle those negative attitudes to age and disability. We're challenging the church to lead by example, and it's great that already there are steps being taken. The General Synod, I know last year, agreed to address and remove barriers for disabled people. But there is still more work to do to make sure that the church is inclusive. We believe, though, that wider culture change is required in order to shift these attitudes. So we're calling for a large-scale campaign to shift how we think about care and support, ageing and disability. And it's great that Social Care Futures and the Centre for Ageing Better have already begun this work.
As Archbishop Justin mentioned earlier, underpinning our whole report is our call for a national care covenant, a covenant which would articulate and express the mutual responsibilities of everybody who's involved in care and support, individuals and families and communities and of course, local and national government. The covenant, a national care covenant, would reflect the fact that care and support is much more than just services and systems. It is, as Archbishop Justin mentioned, all about interdependent relationships. We believe that a covenant of this kind should be overseen by national government through a process of sustained public engagement and dialogue with a wide range of stakeholders. Based on what we've heard, we think a covenant should reflect 4 particular aspects. And what I want to do now is just expand on each of those briefly in turn. And they are more investment in communities, a new deal for unpaid carers, a stronger role for the state, and a renewed commitment to our own responsibilities as actively engaged citizens. The first of those, investing in communities. Well, we know that churches and faith groups and community groups of all kinds already do so much to support people of all ages and abilities and to enable them to participate fully in the places where they live. We saw a bit of that in the video at the very beginning, the community centre where we had the privilege of visiting. But communities also need to be fully equipped and resourced and empowered in order to provide inclusive and effective care and support. And that means, not least, supporting local churches with the training and resources they need to provide community-based support in ways that actually empower people. Thriving communities are built on mutuality and reciprocity. The second theme, a new deal for unpaid carers. I think we all celebrate and are grateful for the efforts of millions of unpaid carers in our country who care for their loved ones, often under very difficult circumstances. And as Anna has mentioned, we're delighted to have some unpaid carers with us today who have very kindly contributed to our work as a commission. We must support unpaid carers to ensure that they receive the emotional and practical and financial support that they need themselves to lead a full life. Unpaid carers and the people for whom they care should be able to enter freely into caring relationships out of love rather than out of necessity. And this is the particular theme of an excellent new report that's about to come out from a select committee of the House of Lords, which has been chaired by Baroness Andrews, who's here with us and will be on our panel in a moment. And then third, a stronger role for the state. As has already been mentioned, the report isn't saying that the state should do everything. It's all about mutual responsibilities, but it is calling for national government to set out a long-term commitment to introduce a universal entitlement to care and support. And that's because we believe that everyone should be able to lead a full life by accessing care and support when they need it, regardless of wealth or income. One way or another, we're going to be paying more for care and support as a society. That is clear. The political and moral choice is where we choose for those costs actually to fall. We believe that national government should put in place stronger mechanisms to ensure that existing rights and entitlements to care are upheld. And then accepting our mutual responsibility as actively engaged citizens, recognizing that we, all of us, have a role to play. We can't just put it out there. And we must contribute where we can. It means being willing to contribute funding through taxation to ensure that everyone can access care and support. It means looking out for other people in our communities through volunteering. And it means that when we or those we love draw on care and support, engaging proactively to shape the care we need.
So in addition to rethinking attitudes and rebalancing roles and responsibilities, we come to our third big change, a radical redesign of how care and support is organised. Everyone we spoke to throughout the Commission's work told us the same thing. The system doesn't work for them. So simply tinkering around the edges won't be enough. Firstly, we want a system that puts people at the centre of decision-making, getting rid of bureaucratic assessment that's generally focused on rationing care and replacing it with something that's simple, clear and consistent. We want care planning that doesn't make assumptions about what family and friends are willing and able to give, so-called carer blind, but rather that starts with what matters to you. Trusting people and their carers to spend the budget wisely with appropriate support and advocacy where needed. And finally, social workers liberated from the bureaucracy of assessment so they can do the job that they came into the profession to do. This redesign will also require different things of local authorities. Over time, it will be a shift away from a focus on contracts and commissioning. We know that many local authorities are already doing some of these things differently, but we want to see local authorities everywhere taking a lead in shaping and investing in this network of community-based support and doing so in partnership as well with faith-based organisations. We also would want them to encourage and invest in new provider models, in particular in diverse supported housing options, as well as ensuring the uptake of assistive technologies to support people in their daily living. We've heard a lot from others about the workforce, and in order to deliver our reimagined vision for care and support, we do need a new approach to the workforce, a long-term plan for recruitment as well as retention of care workers that balance skills and values, fair reward and opportunities for career progression. But we also call for the redesigning of roles so that they better meet the needs and wishes of those who draw on care and support, but are also more satisfying jobs for those working in the sector. So taken together, we recognise this is an ambitious call and we can't achieve this overnight. But we were asked to reimagine and we did think big, because the way that we're approaching care and support at the moment is not working. So rethinking attitudes, rebalancing roles and responsibilities, redesigning the system. This is our reimagined vision for care and support. It's a vision for the future in which people who draw on care and support are in the driving seat of their own care, unpaid carers are better supported and valued, and care workers are recognised for their skill and contribution. We all stand to benefit from living in a society where all can flourish, regardless of age or ability. I hope you will join us in helping make a reality of this vision. Thank you. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our video from Livability's Changes for the Future Forum. We met with members of the forum during our listening and engagement exercise, and I'm delighted that they've had the opportunity to respond to our report. So please sit back and listen, and we have some of those as guests here as well today. So thank you.
Hello, Your Holiness, and welcome. My name is Thomas Somerset Howe. I live at Livability Ashley Place in Bognor Regis, and I am the Ashley Place champion for the Changes to the Future Forum. What the forum provides is a place for people within the livability service to come together and discuss their care and any improvements if necessary. You may be aware, back in 2021, we had a meeting via Zoom with the Reimagining Care Commission. What this meeting entailed was we had discussions in a large group to start with. Then after a few minutes, we all broke into smaller groups. Then we came back and collated all the information that everyone had discussed, and it was placed into the report, which you have read. And I think that it went very well, and I think that this report can be used as a template going forward in the future. What care means to me on a personal level is, as long as the person being provided the care is listened to, then they are more comfortable. But also what is important is the person providing the care needs to be listened to, so that their relationship becomes very symbiotic, because then it benefits both people. Following on from this, you'll hear from 4 other members of the forum. You'll hear from Sharon, Debbie and Michelle. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.
Hi, my name is Debbie. I'm supported by Livability. I live in supported living house with my friend, and I really liked it. And I was asked to answer the questions for the Archbishop's report. I'm in the forum called Changes for the Future, and we all got to take part. I have been a Christian all my life. I go to church independently. This is important to me. I was also asked to help with the Wave project. The Livability chaplain supported me to be part of this. This was really important to me, to share up my faith of Jesus Christ with everyone. I go to work at McDonald's. I am part of the team and volunteer at St John's Ambulance. I have done this for a very long time, and I have helped a lot of people. I like going into town, going to see shows, and my support helps me to learn new skills and live the life I want. I could not do this without the lovely support I get.
My name is Sharon Gibbs. I live at Newport Place. What Port gives me is to go out and about doing things that I do in life, like go out, meet friends, go social, and live the life that I know to the full. But we have support helping us to do that. We also got support to go to see the Queen up in state. That was a sad day, but also a magical day, because not everybody got to go in, but me and my friend did. Michelle.
Michelle, what is good care mean to you? I think good care means to me where you're safe, where your family and friends can come and see you and hang out, and where you can go out shopping and cinema and do activities like in the place where we live, don't you?
Yeah.
And go football as we do.
Yeah.
It was fun. Like a movie of 50th birthday party. That was a banger and a half. And my 40th, even though when the care staff and all the made it possible that made it possible. That was an amazing day. Yes. And I played discos with you leading it. That's DJ. Yeah, DJ. On the mics and that, and we have somebody come in as well. Yeah, singers. We could have anybody in normally get what we have to. Yeah, the singers. You're very good with them because you go on the mic and oh yeah, I go on the mic and sing. The trips are going to the seaside and that. Especially when we used to go to Brighton, that was good. And Southend for the day. Yeah. That's what kids would be like to me. Yeah, always. Somewhere home from home. Yeah. And make you feel safe. Of course.
Fantastic, and thank you so much for Livability for putting that video together and the members of the Future Forum for their contribution. So I'd like to now invite the panel to come up and join me to discuss the report. So as they come up, I will do some quick introductions. So we have joining us up here, Fazile Hardy, who's Director of Policy at Disability Rights UK. Emily Holtzhausen, who is Director of Policy and Public Affairs at Carers UK. Sarah McClinton, President of ADAS, the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services. The Reverend Adam Edwards, who is currently Acting Chief Executive of the Church Urban Fund. And Baroness Andrews, already mentioned as Chair of the House of Lords Adult Social Care Committee. So, hopefully, everybody has now come to the stage and taken their seats. I'm going to come and sit with you for this. I think there's room for me on the end. Great. If I can not fall off the end of the stage. Great. So, you've all had chance to read the report. You've heard again today from Bishop James and I some of the main headlines. So I'd like to start with you, Fazile, really on this issue of rethinking attitudes. Why is rethinking attitudes sort of such an important part of what we're proposing here?
Thank you, Anna, and good morning to everyone. Rethinking attitudes is so important, and I'm so pleased that the Archbishop's Commission treated this subject so centrally. We all know that the current state of social care is dire. There's real injustice to disabled people, and there's urgent need of change. And I think this report really helps us see a way forward for hundreds of thousands of disabled people, young and old, with varying conditions, to maybe have a better future. It's been already mentioned that the lives of disabled people are equal to those of non-disabled people, but it just didn't always feel like that, and it certainly didn't feel like that during some periods of the pandemic. The report also talks about the need for disabled and non-disabled people to be us and not for disabled people to be them. And I think that's a really important point as well, because if we're othered, if we're seen as not kind of, quotes, normal, then the solutions for our futures won't be good enough. And we saw in that livability video that we all deserve the best possible life and we all deserve to flourish, and we should have that right. So I think the report calling this out is really, really important. Negative attitudes towards disabled people are so pervasive, and we mustn't, we might be in an audience where we feel that, maybe we have positive attitudes, but that is just not shared within society. And I think disabled people would testify to that. We're often viewed as weak, we're often viewed as powerless, we're often seen as victims. Through the pandemic, we were seen as vulnerable, even though it was the situations we were being put in that was vulnerable, not ourselves. We can be viewed as burdens on society, as objects of pity. We can be seen as passive recipients of services. We can have low expectations about what we can do and what we can contribute, and assumptions made about what we can and can't do. So I think the picture is very bleak, and that does affect disabled people ourselves, because we often internalise some of those negative attitudes, and it takes us a while as disabled people to begin to discard that negativity and actually think, hold on a minute, it's the society around us that needs to change, it's not us. But, that can hold us back from fulfilling our own potential. And these attitudes, they're not just attitudes, they have consequences. They have consequences, possibly, is it attitudes that have othered us that have led to successive governments not tackling care and support, not funding it properly, not developing proper policy responses, and allowing the system to be on its knees. It's certainly attitudes and actions that have led to disabled people not attaining equal education, not being able to sometimes get jobs, not being able to reach our potential, often to be living in poverty, often to have worse well-being than the rest of the population. So attitudes have consequences. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised because throughout history, ableism has been very pervasive, and we've seen disabled people being laughed at in freak shows and circuses, being treated as objects of pity, being confined in asylums and workhouses, being segregated and secluded in institutions. And so it's not surprising that our attitudes and our society is riddled with ableism. And I think we do need to call it out before we can move forward. And we see the most pernicious impacts of ableism in disability hate crime, but we also see every day acts of microaggression, unkindness, discourtesy. But we do have to be positive, and I think this report does give us positivity. Anna talked about a kind of coalition that could come together of people with lived experience and civic society and faith groups, political persuasions of all stripes, to really rethink attitudes and to move towards a care and support system that's fit for 2023 and the future. I think it's also fair to say that disabled people have led some of the most amazing change over the last 30 or 40 years, fighting and securing direct payments, the Disability Discrimination Act, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And we need to be part of developing that future where attitudes are put the negative attitudes are binned and the positive ones are allowed to come out into the light of day. And I think disabled people, we need to be given the support to take the leadership roles in politics, in our own organisations, in public office. And we need to be given that seat at the table so that we can co-produce services and co-produce our own care and support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fazile. I mean, absolutely right. We must call it out. And I think, it's very clear that attitudes do have consequences. And that's why we put it sort of top of our priorities, that we really felt strongly that nothing would change if we didn't change attitudes. So I want to come now to Emily. We proposed in our report a new deal for carers. What difference could that make?
Well, I just wanted to start by saying thank you, really, to the Commission for having such an inclusive approach to building this report and allowing some really valued people within our network who are here today to, like Helen, to contribute their experiences. And I'm just thinking about the new deal for carers and this vision that we have before us. I'm just thinking about a story that was told to me just this morning about the journey to get here. When good care is in place, it allows everybody to fill their lives to the full. It allows people to come here to the place they want to be. If that care doesn't work, they're not here. Or sometimes that caring relationship just has to take precedence and everything else has to be put aside. And so I think what we're celebrating today are care systems that allow people to be here as well. And I think that's incredibly important. So as well as being the Director of Policy at Carers UK, representing unpaid carers, I'm also very honoured to be the co-chair of the Care and Support Alliance with Jackie O'Sullivan from MenCap and Caroline Abrams from Age UK. And a lot of the things that are recommended sit very well with the principles of what we want to see for a good, really good care system. The new deal for carers is very much based on carers' experiences. It feels that it speaks to the experiences that people have shared. And I just want to talk about just a few things. I think very importantly, what you talk about is restoring relationships, and perhaps we don't place enough focus on that and look at how important really good care is to restoring relationships so that people are not defined just by caring and equally not defined just by disability or by age, but of who they are, because people can be all of those three things in one go. And relationships, people talk to us, our carers and our members talk to us about, I want to be a wife again. I want to be the son, the daughter, the brother, the sister, the neighbour. And that's what care can do for all of us, is to bring that to our lives. Baroness Andrews' very well-titled report is A Gloriously Ordinary Life, which is what we're talking about here. Some of the things go to the real heart of what carers want to see and how we really value care in our society. It talks about, for example, a review of carers allowance. For those of you who don't know, that's the main carers benefit. You have to be providing at least 35 hours of care per week for somebody with quite significant disabilities or conditions. And for that, you are given £69.70 per week. That is not a good reflection on how we value care in this country, and the report quite rightly calls for a review. We should not be seeing families pushed into poverty because of the need and lack of care. We should certainly not see family members have to give up work in order to care when that is not their choice. Now, sometimes it is a choice, and people want to do that. They want to be able to provide that care that the Archbishop Justin talked about earlier, and Bishop James. But there are times when people have no choice. And so the New Deal for Carers, when it looks at being able to juggle work and care, that is to help people with their choices, not just finances, and to, of course, keep the economy running, because we need more people, disabled people and unpaid carers, as active members of the workforce if they're able to do so. So very pleased to see that as part of the report. And there are just two more points I wanted to make. One is the use of language in the report, which I think is fundamentally important. It talks not just about breaks, but about restorative breaks, to restore the heart, the mind, the feeling of who one is. And I think that's something that we are going to adopt in the heart of our policy, because it's not, oh, well, have you had a bit of time off? Have you had a restorative break? And I think that is what the quality of what we're looking in our lives. Finally, I just wanted to just say that the report is very important. When we brought together a group of different carers, the point, people were making very different points, and spirituality across all different faiths was very important to them, even of people who were no faith, had said they had no faith. There was an important point about spirituality, and I think that is a point that can often be overlooked. So I'm very excited about the report. I think after the sort of height of the pandemic, this is exactly what we need, which has been beautifully expressed by you, Anna, today. And we're looking very much forward to working with you and working with partners and with our members to see how this can be implemented in the future. And there's no better time. I think the urgency is absolutely there. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks again to those carers that contributed to our work. We hope we did listen, and we hope we have reflected what we heard from you about restoring relationship. And I think, as many of us on the Commission were and are carers, I think it was something we felt very strongly ourselves. So one of the big ideas, and hopefully one that sort of got some of the headlines today, I know there's a couple of journalists in the audience, and we have been briefing this out, was this idea of a national care covenant, national care covenant, let me get it right. And so obviously we're interested in what role national government could play in taking a leadership role in the development of the national care covenant. So Baroness Andrews, what are your thoughts on this idea?
No pressure there, clearly. Can I just start by saying how much I enjoyed the video? I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and it's fantastic to see you in the audience. And the first answer I would give to the question was, what can government do? Government can see this video. Send a copy to every government department so they can see what you mean and what we heard today by a full life. It's what we called a gloriously ordinary life, and it was glorious and really, really impressive to see the range of activities and the range of engagement and relationships. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for inviting me. It's a huge privilege to be here, and it's a huge privilege to be on this platform, and to see many people whom I only saw virtually when we were doing our report. And that was an extraordinary privilege for me and everybody who sat on that, not least because we shared Bishop James. and we listened to so many people, not least people like Emily and Sila, and learned so much, actually, about the real issues. So much overlap between those two reports, actually, because, again, it was about developing the sort of approach which is long overdue, moving away from the dysfunctional and the dark narrative, which is the reality for many people's lives, no doubt, but to put adult social care in its proper social context as an enormous social benefit, something which was left out in 1945 when the health service was designed, because in those days, most women didn't work. Most disabled people did not live long lives, and it never actually got a grip on the national imagination the way it should have. And I sense a change in the zeitgeist, not just because of your report and our report, but I think there is a genuine understanding. Unfortunately, it tends to be portrayed in relationship to the health service and the dependence on the health service. But I think that is changing as well. I think the more we use this positive language, this ambitious language of the changes that you want to see, the more collective voice can be amplified. And I think the National Care Covenant is a really compelling idea. It's not the sort of idea government come up with. It would have made no sense for us to make that judgment. And not even Parliament, actually. But I think the authority of the Church and the compassion and the theological depth of the interpretation is very, very powerful. And I think what it does, actually, it draws on the concept, it is a social contract concept, what we owe each other. What do we owe each other? What can we give each other? The clarity around expectation, as well as around roles and responsibilities. Really important. We have never had that conversation. We've never brought everybody together in the same room. We've never given people a chance to share their expectations safely without risk. And I think the National Care Covenant can do that. And I think creating a discourse without risk, where everybody's equal, where nobody's voice is louder than anybody else, is really unique and really important. And one of the things that I think is important in relation to what government can do, of course government has to be a partner. And of course it has to show leadership. It doesn't make it the most powerful partner. It makes it a particular sort of partner who can do particular sorts of things. And when you look at all those people in that co-production of the covenant, and the roles that are ascribed in terms of what people can do, it's very much an equal partnership. And the shared values and the shared ambitions are going to be really what drives it. But for me, one of the outstanding things that this covenant can do, and it's a responsibility that goes across government, is to ensure that social care becomes more visible, that it becomes a national imperative. And one of the reasons we explored in our report, and I'm not going to talk about our report, although it's incredibly tempting. One of the things that we looked at is, why is it invisible? And of course it's invisible not just historically, as I've said, but because it's private. It happens behind closed doors. It happens to people who feel that only they can deliver because they're required to. They're often isolated from the community, sometimes from the rest of the family. And we haven't had the imagination and the scope to actually deliver. So making it visible is really, really important. It's also, of course, about that act of public engagement and using the moral authority as well as the political authority of government to engage. And then you have set the challenges. Make the policy work. Make the Care Act 2014, which had so much good stuff in it, including much better language, and you are so right. The language is horrible. It's misleading. It puts people down. We need to change a lot of the language. But those challenges about a universal entitlement, unpaid carers, that is not difficult. They've been disappointed time and again. They've been promised and disappointed. And then, of course, the question of prioritizing funding, realizing that it's an investment, a preventative policy, not a reactive policy, a positive choice, which the country wants because it will make such a massive difference to the quality of life and the quality of relationships that we all share. So I will do my best. We'll keep on campaigning, especially in the House of Lords, where we really do care about these things.
And thank you, Baroness Andrews, for your leadership in that side of the House and for your work on making visible the invisible in a way through your work. And hopefully, yes, with colleagues in the House and with Bishop James in his role as lead in the Lords, we can continue to have debate about both reports because I think they are very complementary, not least because of poor Bishop James has been very busy this year on He'll be ready for retirement, I'm sure. I turn now to Sarah. So one of our big things was a radical redesign of the care system. Are your members sort of wiping their brows going, oh no, or do we need an overhaul of the current social care system?
Well, thank you, Anna. And can I just start by saying a huge thank you. I think it's a really excellent report. And I suppose as someone who represents directors across the country, who represents social care leaders, I think the moral leadership here is so important and really valued. So yes, I would say we do need a radical overhaul, but I think it's really important that is driven by values, and we desperately need to see change in our care system. ADAS as an organisation has been calling for a wider public debate about how we think about living, working and caring into the future. So really wholeheartedly welcome the notion of covenant and that need for public discourse, and that making social care visible, I think, is really important. Because social care is about all of us, isn't it? It's about us, our friends, our family who need support today or tomorrow. And it's really that caring relationships are fundamental to humanity. And I think I just wanted to reinforce Emily's points about the language, because I think that humanity is thread throughout, really, in terms of the language. And one of the things that's wrong with our care system is often the language becomes very bureaucratic, technocratic, and we lose some of that humanity if we're not careful. So I think that's really important. So I think we do radically need to shift perceptions of the public and politicians about what social care is, because often it is still seen through the lens of care homes. The video obviously showed it's very different, what's important in terms of people's lives. But at the moment, particularly, I think you can be forgiven for thinking that social care is about discharge from hospitals. And the report obviously reflects how much broader social care is. And how support is really about enabling people to live good and fulfilling lives and to flourish in their communities. So I think that means for us as directors that it's really important that we're working within local authorities, with our housing colleagues, with public health and those colleagues that work on community development, because that is really as important as our relationship with the NHS, which often is the focus. I felt I should say something about what the report says, really, in terms of who pays for care and that reform of charging. And personally, absolutely support the report as recommendation in terms of that being free at the point of delivery. The importance, I think, that is really helps in terms of parity with the NHS, etc. But this is an issue that governments, successive governments, have failed to tackle, really, over decades. And the last attempt that we've seen on charging reform has now been delayed, one could argue kicked into the long grass beyond the next election. So I think for directors, what's important is really to get on with that. We can't afford another 20 years of debate. We absolutely need to get on to making social care a more universal service, and there are different options, obviously, as to how we do that. I guess the next thing to say is that in order to radically shift the system, we do need to recognise that need for long-term and sustainable planning, funding, which then enables that longer-term planning. And what we've seen is a brewing crisis, as the Archbishop referred to, and lots of sticking plasters, really, in terms of responding to that. Following decades, really, of underinvestment, which has had really severe consequences. And I think that just two of those, so I think that to mention, that has led to suboptimal models of commissioning, which don't provide the kind of personalised care which is set out and which I think we would all want to see. It's also led to that position where people who work in care are hugely underpaid and undervalued. We know people can earn more in hospitality and retail, or they can earn more doing very similar roles in the NHS. So I think we have to see radical reform to pay and career progression and those things that really reflect reward and the value of people who work in care. And then, I would say I think the report is really aligned with what directors are saying right across the country in terms of what needs to change and the kinds of care and support that we all want to see, and ADAS as an organisation would want to see in terms of new models of care that you're pointing to. I would argue, as Baroness Andrews I think has already suggested, that the Care Act provides a really good framework for that. The issue is it has not been properly funded or implemented, but it does give us that focus on prevention, health and well-being, those personalised models of care where people are really shaping the care and support that they need, those different models that we need in terms of housing options, etc. So I think the role of social workers is really critical in terms of less focus on process and the more complex work that they do, helping people through what are often very difficult points in their lives, as well as that valuing of more direct care staff. I would like to see the equivalent of Sure Starts really across the country for adults that really provide that universal preventive offer for people and enable them to make informed and considered choices, really, in terms of the care and support they need. So, yes, really, really welcome it, and huge thank you again.
Thank you, Sarah. So there's another one to add to our sort of visioning of what these community hubs might look like, this universal provision of community support. There's a model in Sure Start, which we perhaps didn't name, but I think is very much akin to what we're saying about having a universal offer of first contact support for everyone in the community. Thanks for sharing that thought, Sarah. So I'm going to turn now to our final panellist, Adam. So in the report, obviously, it was a church-sponsored commission. We did look at the role of faith groups. We hope that they could play an even greater role in the future in providing support and enabling participation of older and disabled people. What are your thoughts on that, Adam?
Well, firstly, we really welcome the report, not just in its recommendations, but the theological underpinnings of it. And we really hope that it will help faith groups and churches to engage with and discern how they can support and help people participate in a greater way. Obviously, with the organisation I represent and what I'm wearing around my neck, I tend to think that faith has a massive role to play in helping support those who are in need of care, but also those who are caring. And there are three elements I kind of wanted to pick up on today in particular. The first one is place. Faith groups have a place in communities and often physical places at the centre of communities which can be used. One of the schemes that CUF runs is Places of Welcome, which has 600 venues across the country. The Reimagining Care Commission report talks very much about agency of people participating, and that's the whole premise of Places of Welcome, that people don't come and be passive for a couple of hours. They really come to celebrate, to contribute, and to participate in their local community, because everybody, regardless of age or ability, has something to offer and is of value. And these are safe places where people can be themselves. They're also spaces that can be at the centre of those communities for people to share their stories and to share information and to signpost to. And a couple of illustrations I want to give on this. Ron was widowed, and his one daughter had died of cancer, and Ron was going through some cancer diagnosis himself. He'd become quite isolated and lonely. One of his daughters encouraged him to come along to a place of welcome, and Ron gradually integrated, shared his story, and got some support from his local community. Ron said that every time he went into his place of welcome, he felt like a celebrity. Such was the welcome that he was given. And eventually, he found the confidence to be a befriender himself and help other people to join and to participate. And then also Betty. Betty was 79 and she was living with dementia. In her working life, she'd worked in the potteries in Stoke, making flowers out of clay that decorated various beautiful items. And one of the volunteers at the Place of Welcome brought along some clay one week, and as Betty was talking, she played with the clay and made some beautiful roses, just that ingrained memory of the skills that she had been given. And it's a sign of the beauty of our lives that shines out when we're allowed to participate and contribute to our communities. The other thing, picking up a bit on what Emily had said earlier, is that care of the whole person that faith communities give. We're not just looking at one aspect of a person's being or life. We look at that whole person, and the spirituality aspect of that is just so important, so vital to our well-being, and is often underlooked. By looking at the spirituality of people, we can help people find out where God is in their lives. Through the process of loss and change, we can help people lament, but also celebrate and affirm the life and the love that comes to us as we journey on our path. But also not just for the person who is being cared for. Faith groups can provide that support for the carer, especially for the unpaid carer, a place where they can be listened to and they can be valued. And the third thing I'd like to say is the role of faith communities in speaking out, in that role of advocacy and challenge. Faith groups are deeply rooted in the local, understand the needs of local people, and they're relational, not just bringing people together, but providing that bridge between people and local services. Faith groups can stand in solidarity with those who find themselves vulnerable, and I think faith groups can have that role in listening, in amplifying voice, helping to convene people to come together for a local conversation, and also challenging the provision both at a local level and a national level. And Bishop James said in his speech about the role that churches can play in this, in equipping churches to be able to respond to some of the findings in this report, and the Church Urban Funds look forward to playing its role in equipping churches to be able to do this.
Thank you, Adam, and we're really keen. One of our recommendations was how do we equip local churches, and when we had our interfaith dialogue, there was a real sense from leaders of other faiths that their own local communities also want and have a hunger for more resources and support to know how best to be able to support and empower people in their communities who are living with disability or in older ages. So I think it's something that we hope that whilst our report was very much drawing on Christian values and theology, that actually, whether it's other faiths or the secular world, that the messages and the principles that underpin this do have that universal appeal. I'm very conscious that we started some 15 minutes late. We had hoped to sort of be now opening up to take some questions and sort of comments from the floor. I'm going to sort of look at Stephen and Justin on the front row, because I know your time is going to be... Are you okay if we take another perhaps few minutes now just to allow people from the floor, which will mean we'll just close slightly later, but hopefully there'll still be a moment for some photos and networking, because I know people will be keen to see you at the end. So do we have a couple of roving mics available? I'm looking to see where my volunteers are. They're at your feet, are they, down there? So I know we've got a huge number of different people in the room, all of you with amazing experience, but it would be lovely just to maybe hear one or two comments or questions from the floor, indeed from fellow commissioners who feel they've maybe missed out because they've not been up here. So please do raise your hand and indicate if you would like a microphone to come to you, and then we will just ask you to say who you are, and if you can keep the interventions brief. Gentleman down that end, Will, on the end, if you just raise your hand again so the microphone can come to you. Yep. that would be great. And we'll just take a few comments and questions from the floor. We may or may not have time for the panel to fully respond, but gentlemen there, please do introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, and grateful to you for the commission and the report, which goes very well with our thinking from a Muslim perspective. And I think, the values that you've talked about are values which are common to all faiths, and therefore this is welcome. I think one of our problems is that the role of the communities, faith communities in particular, is undervalued, as has been said, but is also unrecognized. And part of that is because the faith groups or the community groups themselves are not very well organized. So there's a need, if we want a partnership from these groups, we need to capacity build them so that they can make a contribution. Places of worship are, as has been said, empty spaces, and that is where they should be occupied and be used. And that's what I think I would just suggest that we need a toolkit of how to go forward, how these communities can actually engage with the local authorities.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for that contribution. We'll go to the lady in the same row, just pass the microphone along. So just please say who you are.
Hello, I'm one of the Board of Deputies of the British Jews. I'm attached to the lead on health and mental health, and I also attend Haringey Multi-Faith Forum. And I'm also retired in my latter years as a PSHE teacher, so I want to ask one question relating to how we can infiltrate this in the education philosophy of schools. First of all, thank you for inviting us and including us. To be here today has been unbelievably special. That's the only thing I can say. This is going to stay in my heart, rightly so, because it's unbelievably special and really needed. So the question I'm thinking about is, you're talking about community investing in our communities, and our rabbi recently, our chief rabbi, Sir Mervis, has said very much the same about the importance of communities and supporting each other. And I feel it starts at a very early stage. Now, I am out of the PSHE curriculum of 5 years. However, your values, and I spoke to Will about this, are absolutely spot on. Flourishing, mutuality, discussing things with each other, listening. And I'm just wondering how these can be brought up into schools, because caring for your community, yes, you get a lot from home, yes, you get a lot from your faith communities, but school is, I feel, is very much part of it. So I wondered, my question is, can we have any links with education? PSHE in some schools is taught as part of the wellbeing curriculum, and we actually taught RS at the same time.
Okay, that's great.
Sorry, just to add, I feel student council could have a lot to do with that in schools.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, and it's great that both our questions come from sisters and brothers in other faith communities, so thank you for coming. I'm going to take a couple more, so I'm going to go to the back. There's 2 there, and there's 2 there, and then we'll come for some quick reflections from the panel.
Thanks, Will. Hi, my name's Martin Thomas. I'm the chair of a small community charity in Brixton. So 2 related questions, I think.
Can you just make sure the mic's right up in front of you so we can all hear you? That's
okay,
fine.
Try again. Sorry, my name's Martin Thomas. I'm the chair of a small community charity in Brixton. 2 sort of related questions, I think. One is the sort of what next, I guess. Great report. I'm sure that everyone in the room agrees with the thrust of it. There's nothing there to disagree with. It's great. It's won't take mother of an apple pie, but it's the way it needs to be done. The question is, how do we move forward from here? So one question is, what does the church see as the next steps? How is it going to take this forward? Is this about, what's the strategy for engagement with government now? Or are you just waiting for the next government in hope that they'll listen? And related to that, I guess, is a sort of tactical question maybe. The Armed Forces Covenant, which it appeared this is based upon, which is the big idea in the report, is, at the moment, it's about exceptionalism, armed forces exceptionalism. This is, let's extend that to social care. The obvious objection, or the argument coming back I can see as well, why not education? Why not housing, 101 other things? And no government may want to do that. So I'd love to know how you propose to do that.
I'm going to take some, please keep your, yes, lady there in the black, you indicated,
Oh, hello there. My name's Helen. I'm from Pilgrim's Friend Society, which is a Christian organisation. We have care homes and housing schemes across England and one in Scotland. So thinking about our kind of model of care, one thing that we're trying to do is create our care homes as spaces where we connect with the local community and with local churches. And I just wondered what your vision was for increasing those connections between older people who are living in care homes, possibly can't get to church anymore, or their other place of worship that was important to them. How are you thinking those links can be strengthened?
Great, thank you very much. So if you can whiz over to this row, I'm going to take the two... Will, are you going to bring it forward? Somebody else? No, you, yeah. Put your hand up, Catherine. That's it. Right, here we go. Go.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Smith. I'm the Chief Executive at SCI, the Social Care Institute for Excellence. Very much welcome this report, and particularly the focus on values that comes through it. I think that's really important, and about people having meaningful lives and the opportunities to live in the way they want to live. One of the things that hasn't come across, and I've read the report very quickly this morning, so I might have missed it, but one of the things that hasn't come across is a focus on housing, which Sky have done a lot of research on this in terms of, for us, every decision about care, which is an ADAS statement, every decision about care should be a decision about housing, and people being able to have real choice and control over where they live, who they live with, and what the housing looks like. I just wondered if that had come up in any of your conversations and what your thoughts might be on that.
Great. Next one.
Hello, David Pearson, long-term devotee of social care in a variety of professional and personal roles. So congratulations on a well-thought-out report and set of thinking that is complementary and additional. My question is, given that there's a litany of initiatives which haven't seen the light of day in terms of implementation, what are the panel's thoughts on how to take this forward? And what can we all do in this audience and the wider network of people who aren't here to help?
Thank you so much. So I feel like some of these questions are probably as much for me and my fellow commissioners and for Bishop James. There may be some which are questions about what is the church going to do next, which I don't know, perhaps Archbishop Stephen may answer in his closing remarks. But obviously there are some ideas there, and I think particularly that last question from David about what about implementation? What can we all do? And it may be that question that is most appropriate for the panel. I am conscious that time won't allow everybody to come back, so I'm just going to look sort of down the line and see if there's anybody who's particularly keen to come in on one or more of the questions posed. Emily?
I'm very happy to come in on David's question, and others in this audience of Richard, and having written his fantastic book on the number of white papers and green papers. I think it's our collective voice. We are a determined group of people. We have to carry those messages out into our ordinary lives and everyday conversations about the importance of change. We are also, as an organisation of carers, we are unashamedly a campaigning organisation, and the Care and Support Alliance is there to do that. I think the power of those conversations where we take social care into everyday conversations is so important, that people don't think it's something for someone else there. It's actually for all of us and all of our friends and all of our families. And of course, we will not be letting the opportunity of an election go away. And in the short term, of course, some of the stuff that people have raised are, some really tough issues with crisis in the NHS and social care becoming very transactional. So I think we will certainly undertake to do whatever we can to change that dialogue in the spirit of what has been presented today.
Thank you very much, Emily. And Sarah, do you want to briefly come in?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. So I think that a lot of what's described in terms of vision and how things might radically shift is very aligned with what we say as directors, or what Social Care Futures vision highlights. There's lots in there that I think there's lots of common agreement around. And just to Catherine's point, there is quite a lot about housing and different housing options, and really what we're trying to do is support people to live the lives they want to live in their own homes. So I think in terms of coming to David's question, next steps,
Obviously, ADAS equally has got a campaigning role, but I think there's also something about what we can do practically now, and also what's the order of things that we might need to take in order to see change. So what's in our control and what might need to wait for government action, etc. So within local authorities, I think there's more we can do. I think there's points about language, just changing the language we use, the way so our social workers work in terms of that very much a strengths-based approach. So I think it's also about what we can do ourselves now, as well as the need to see that wider public discourse and change in a more systemic way.
Great. Yes. Yeah, go for it.
Very briefly. I mean, I think one of the things that all those questions pointed to, was the extraordinary, the genius of the idea of the covenant is that it can bring all these things together. It can bring the housing, the health and the care people together. And goodness knows we've been trying to do that for a very long time. And that dialogue, can be now enhanced, I think. But the other thing it can bring together is the intergenerational opportunities. Yeah. And this is where I think the issue of the primary, I think primary actually in a way more urgent than secondary education, because that is where children learn kindness. But it's the everyday conversation that you were talking about, actually, which is to give children exemplars of what we mean by kindness and care. And every residential care home should have a playground nearby. And it's that sort of mutual experience. We do not, and the bond between grandchildren and grandparents is so unique and phenomenally powerful. We don't take advantage of these sorts of things actually to transmit values, I think. There's a lot more we can be doing about that.
So, Adam, do you want to quickly come back on the point about empty spaces, churches, how we can...
Absolutely. We've got lots of resources out there. I mentioned Places of Welcome, which we'll be doing more to promote over the coming months. Our Growing Good Toolkit, which helps churches in particular think about how they can engage with local communities. And we're really keen to respond to this report, to work with the commissioners and also the archbishops, to be able to mobilise social action in the local so that this can really land and be a live thing in churches and faith groups around the country. The gentleman who mentioned multi-faith, and we have our Near Neighbours programme, which brings together people of different faiths around community cohesion, so thinking how people from different faiths can come together to be a strong and coherent voice in communities.
And I'm going to give Fazile the last word on the panel.
Thank you. I agree with everything that's been said, and I do think we can all take the rethinking attitudes and rebalancing roles and redesigning systems into our own work and our own passions. But I would really hope that the church and others can try and influence the political parties in the run-up to the general election, because I really do think care and support needs to be funded properly as a system. I think communities need to be supported to play their role. I think disabled people need to be supported to be leaders and take their place at the table. So I really hope that we don't lose the importance of the political, because I think without that, the rest of it will be a lot weaker.
Thank you. And just to say that obviously as individuals, all of us on the Commission, I think, will be continuing to champion the report. If you've got conferences or newsletters or platforms to help us amplify the message, please invite us to contribute. And as I say, I'm sure that Bishop James will also be championing this along with Baroness Andrews in the Lords, and using, I'm sure, private routes to influence as we head into the next general election. So, yeah, please join us. It is about all of us together implementing this report. So I would suggest actually that the panel might just sit here, because otherwise it'll take us a lot of time to get off the stage and back on. And I'm now going to invite Archbishop Stephen to make some closing remarks. So thank you to our panel.
Sisters and brothers, to quote one of the voices on the video, I think that was banging. So thank you. Thank you very much. And as I've heard Anna say, social care is everybody's business. All of us probably at some time in our life will be people who need care, and every one of us has opportunity, capacity to give and share care. And I think the idea of a care covenant is a game changer, because it's about focusing, first of all, on the values of flourishing and mutuality that we all long to see in our homes, our communities, our families, and in the life of our nation, and then recognising that we all have responsibilities and rights where we need clarity. And when we have that clarity, we can build the better, fairer society that we long for. When I first met with the Commission, I shared with them a little analogy that goes around my head, and I'll share it with you again as a way of thinking through how do we understand how we work together as a society to make these things happen. And my analogy is, it's a cold day today, it might snow. If it snows, what do? Well, I reckon it's the government's responsibility to grit the roads. But I also probably reckon it's my responsibility, if I'm able to clear the snow on my driveway. But what about the pavement outside my house? Is that my responsibility, or is that my neighbour's responsibility? Is that the government's responsibility? I'm not sure. And what about if my neighbour is elderly or housebound or disabled in some way? Who clears the snow off their driveway? So I'm a simple soul. I look at it simply. I think, wouldn't it be good if we had a proper grown-up conversation about this so that we can agree? What are my responsibilities? What are the government's responsibilities? What are the community's responsibilities? How can churches and other faith groups and other local groups contribute so that together we can build a fair and just society where everyone can flourish? And that's the other, I think, bit of genius about this commission, is that it starts not with, there's this very difficult problem to be solved. It starts with a big vision of human flourishing and saying these are the values that we want to live by. And if we did live by them, it would make a difference. Yeah, it's going to cost something. Of course it's going to cost something. But muddling along as we are, sticking plasters over problems here, there and everywhere, that is costing an awful lot more, not just financially, but in people's lives that are not flourishing in the way that they can. It's been very, very moving to hear stories from those whose lives are flourishing and from people who get great joy through caring and being cared for. On your behalf, I want to give a huge, huge thank you to the Commission and particularly to Anna and Bishop James for their leadership. With regard to the question about housing, this commission is part of a suite of commissions where we're looking into some of the big issues facing our nation. One of them is on housing, and I'd recommend that that's read alongside what we're doing here. I'm a storyteller, so let me finish with a story. I think we need to be more generous. I think one of the ways forward is for us to recognise the parts that we have to play individually and collectively in churches, in government and in other community groups. And so my story about how to learn to be generous is this. There was once a holy man. There was once a man who longed for great wealth. And in a dream, he was told to go to a bend of the river at sunset where he would meet a holy man who would give him a precious stone that would deliver him untold wealth and riches. So, faithful to the dream, he went to the bend of the river at sunset. Sure enough, there was a holy man. He knelt before the holy man and said to the holy man, "Give me the stone, give me the stone." The holy man rummaged in his pocket, pulled out the most enormous diamond you could imagine, filled the palm of his hand and said, "Why, you must mean this. I found it on the forest path earlier today. Of course you can have it." The young man, clutching onto the precious stone, runs home, absolutely overjoyed, except that night he cannot sleep. And he tosses and turns on his bed, deeply troubled in his spirit. At dawn, he returns to the bend in the river. He finds the holy man. He kneels before him for a second time, and returning the stone, says to him, "Please, please, give me the wealth that enables you to give this away for nothing." We have a part to play in building a better, fairer world, and this commission and this care covenant could be an incredible beginning. Thank you for being here and finding out more about it.
So do please stay. There's networking, I think, and refreshments for those who are able. And thank you again all for joining us today. Thank you.